Good evening. I'd like to call the Anacortes City Council meeting for September 13th, 2021 to order. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter,
Present.
Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Walters, Ms. Cleveland McGrath,
Here.
Ms. Moulton,
Here.
Mr. McDougall, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right. Ms. Hunt, do we have a quorum? We do?
We have 5 council members
Okay.
present, so yes, we do.
Very good.
Mayor Gare.
Yes, Mr. McDougall.
Hi, sorry I joined late. I could use some city fiber at home.
Okay.
Had a little trouble.
All right. So anything else? All right, we'll move on to item 3 under announcements and committee reports. And item 3A is the COVID-19 update. As of September 2nd, Washington State's data show that there were 21,757 vaccine breakthrough cases among the 4 million vaccinated people that were vaccinated between January 17th and August 21st. This means that only 0.5% of vaccinated Washingtonians have had breakthrough infections. Of the breakthrough cases, we have data that just 9% require hospitalization and less than 1% die of COVID-related illness. On Thursday, Governor Inslee announced a new statewide requirements that masks must be worn at large outdoor gatherings of 500 people or greater. This new requirement will apply to both vaccinated and unvaccinated people and is in effect starting today. This is an expansion of the current indoor mask mandate that went into effect on August 23rd. As of today, September 13th, in Skagit County Public Health reports a total of 8,323 cases of COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. We've had 7,000 positive cases for the PRC, and that is the lab tested COVID test. We've had 1,322 positive from the antigen, and that is the instant test. We've had 92 deaths in our county and 488 people have hospitalized. We also at Island Hospital had, between August 1st and today, we've had 5 deaths, 3 of which are Anacortes residents and 2 from out of the area. Skagit County currently has a case rate of 574.9 per 100,000 cases over the last 14 days and a hospitalization rate of 19.2 COVID patients per 100,000 over 7 days. Vaccines in Skagit County. To date, we've had a total of 164,553 vaccine doses have been administered in the county, and we are at 69.9% of all Skagitonians 12 years old and older that are at least partially vaccinated against COVID-19. Between September 1st and 6th, approximately 593 more Skagitonians got their first dose. COVID-19 testing and vaccinations are now available at the Skagit County Fairgrounds Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Beginning today at the Skagit County Fairgrounds, testing and vaccines will be changing its operations and limiting testing and vaccination services to individuals who live, work, and go to school in Skagit County. This change is due to the high demand and the supply chain issues of testing supplies. We've been getting people from out of the area, so that's why they made the change. Also, beginning September 13, testing will be limited to individuals 5 and older who are actively exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms or who have had a known COVID-19 exposure. Testing should not be used as a guaranteed safety. Testing is a point-in-time measure of whether someone has COVID-19 and should not be used to justify decisions that are risky. And if you're unvaccinated, like to travel or gathering in large groups, the best way to be safe is by getting vaccinated and wearing a mask when in a crowded setting. The rates in Skagit County over the last 2 to 3 weeks are the highest they've been through the entire pandemic. Though we may be seeing a slight leveling off of new cases, our rates are still a great concern. I also wanted to announce that Island Hospital did a community briefing last Thursday, September 9th, and we put those on the city's website, and it also can be viewed on Channel 10. And I personally implore every citizen to use the tools we have to protect yourself and your family. Use a mask, social distance, use hand washing, and vaccines. Thank you. Is there any other comments tonight on COVID-19?
Oh, sure. Mayor Gear.
Yes, hello.
Hey, Christine's here. Hey, I think it's always important that folks, if they aren't personally familiar with someone who's gotten COVID, it's always nice to kind of use this platform to share at least some personal experience. So last week I shared that both my girls, one had multiple symptoms, one was completely asymptomatic. They are all on the mend. The asymptomatic one still has no symptoms. As of last week, both my husband and I had tested negative. Giving it another 4 or 5 days, we both ended up testing positive. And I think part of that, when we talk about breakthrough cases, this is at least anecdotally, but when we had our breakthrough cases, we were dealing with a 15-month-old baby and a 3.5-year-old. And when they're sick, you're going to hold them. You're going to sleep with them on your chest. They're going to cough in your face and drool because they're teething. So our viral load that we were exposed to was significantly higher than most folks. So I'm really pleased that I got the vaccine. My symptoms were pretty tame. I had what I would consider a medium case of allergies, were my symptoms. My husband, on the other hand, had a 101-degree temperature for 3 days straight with Tylenol, and still has some congestion in his lungs, and he felt it on his cardiovascular system, who was also vaccinated. So I encourage folks that you don't know how you're going to respond to to coronavirus, but talk to your doctor because it's coming. And as much as we try to protect ourselves, that vaccine is super important that we could still continue to take care of our kids and our family. And again, everyone else who had been exposed to my kids, they'd all been vaccinated and none of them have had breakthrough cases, and it's been almost 2 weeks. So if you have a reasonable exposure, they were all protected because they'd had the vaccine. So I just talk to your doctors and please consider it, because a 1-year-old and 3-year-old can't get the vaccine yet. So we got to work towards our community as a whole.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on now to item 3B, our Skagit County Law and Justice Report.
Mayor here.
Mr. Miller.
Apologize to Marcia. I should have updated you on the schedule. They've moved that meeting to the October 12th. October 12th now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Item 3C, our Finance Committee update.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. McDougall.
Finance Committee met last week. Mr. Walters, Mr. Carter, and myself, along with Mr. Hogan and some guest stars from other departments. We covered the cemetery expansion. We had a good discussion about that. Basically, we're running out of room with the existing space that we have. So there is some urgency to get the expansion done. Unfortunately, the construction bids have come in higher than the original engineering estimate. So Parks Department is looking at like taking some of the work in-house to be able to reduce some of that cost. We're also looking at potentially getting a bit more funding from impact fees and REIT going forward. So the shortfall is, sorry, I don't have it in my notes right now. But anyway, we have this shortfall. We're looking at potentially like either, there could be funding come just from surplus in the general fund to cover it. Again, because it is a bit urgent as we are running out of space. Another option that we discussed, which I think we may have kind of settled upon this as the best option, is to do an inter-fund loan from one of the other, say one of the utilities, and amortize that over 4 years. We're not allowed to do like a long-term loan, but I think we're talking about like 200K kind of numbers. So, so an inter-fund loan paid off over 4 years at a, kind of the treasury rate sort of interest. So 55K a year, something like that, paid back probably through general fund. But that would at least spread out the impact over 4 years rather than take it on in one. And I think we'll get kind of a formal discussion of that soon. Next item we discussed was we got basically an update on the automated meter reading. And we're getting updates to the entire council on that tonight. So I will not steal thunder on that. And finally, we had a discussion of two other things, actually. Another firm that provides like financial reporting, sort of like transparency kind of toolkit called Questica. We looked at them. We're thinking, of the three that we've looked at, the first one is actually probably the favorite right now. We're going to have another discussion on it probably at the next finance meeting and hopefully bring forward a recommendation from there. And then finally, we had a discussion about the council COVID procedures. And, we've got at the end of this month, our resolution expires. We've already kind of dropped most of the sort of emergency aspects of the original resolution from March of 2020. There are still some pieces in there. And we were thinking we might kind of drop them all. However, provide or write a new set of council procedures around remote participation and sort of in a current COVID, but also post-COVID era where remote participation is probably fairly regular. So, or at least fairly normal. So, so yeah, that's what we were discussing, and probably like the meeting before the end of the month, we'll have some sort of resolution to replace the existing sort of emergency procedures resolution. And that's it for Finance Committee.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on now to item 3D, which is our Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee report.
Mayor Gear,
Ms. Moulton.
thank you. The HACS committee met on September 9th. Ms. Cleland McGrath, Mr. Walters, and staff and we had a presentation by Habitat for Humanity board members and the executive director of that organization. And we talked about how families qualify for Habitat homes, the sweat equity that they put in, what their area median income is. So basically the requirements for them to be able to purchase a home, and how they build equity. And we talked a lot about those sort of details and the importance of those people, the homeowners, to pay their mortgages and learn about finance and budgeting through classes. And it's a pretty rigorous process. So it was really great to learn about that. Habitat is the mortgage holder. And some of the questions, the reason we're talking about this is because Habitat for Humanity has proposed that the city lease some of its land out on West 5th for the building of some Habitat homes, like 2 or 3, depending on what the lot would accommodate with our zoning regulations. So the questions that we had as committee members were about continued affordability of these homes to ensure that they are affordable in perpetuity as owners sell and move on in their lives to different spots. And how do we maximize the density available to help as many people as possible? And so it was a really good presentation, and we will continue conversations with them. There is a draft lease currently at the city's legal department being reviewed. And I believe that will come back to the HACS committee before it would come to council. So we'll hear more about that in the future. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Any additional comments? Item 3E, Personnel Committee, that group was canceled, so we'll hear from them next week. And then we'll go on to item 3F, our Planning Committee report.
Mayor Gear.
Ms. Cleland.
So we just had our planning committee meeting at 5 o'clock today. Ms. Moulton and I were there. And it was a quick meeting. We just kind of discussed a couple items. We had a constituent come forward and share their concerns about self-service storage is currently allowed outright in the commercial zone, and whether or not that really fits with our goals and priorities when we look at our comprehensive plan for our commercial zone in the downtown core. So we're thinking that is probably one of those fixes that we should address based on our major development regulation update. So Mr. Miesmer is going to get us some work, present to us later this month about that and whether or not we may want to make some modifications to it. The other thing was continuing to work with the R4 bonus height resolution. He plans to have that in front of us by the end of September. We're getting down to our, I think, October deadline. So we're hoping to get that in front of us to be discussed and move forward. I know that it's kind of been dragging a bit just because we've been super busy in that department. We talked a little bit about the MJB property and some questions that have come forward from the public, and just that while they're putting in very simple, or not very simple, they're putting in, roads and utilities, that has been moving forward, but any future projects and development is going to have quite a large package and come in front of council and have rigorous review. So they're just in, as Mr. Miesmer phrased it, they're in phase 0.1 with just road and utilities. So I think that people see a lot of action there right now, and they want to have more information. But during our development regulations and our our strategic planning, this was the what we discussed and approved was kind of this infrastructure, this rough plan, and they're actually executing it very closely to what we had discussed. So everything's kind of moving forward, and things should come in front of council in the near future as they develop. I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right, we'll
Mayor
move
Gitter?
on. Yes, Mr. McDougall.
Very quickly, I need to leave at about 6:30 for a family event, so I'll just quietly drop off.
All right, thank you. We're going to item 4, which is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience or online that would like to comment to the council on anything that is not on the agenda tonight? If so, please raise your hand, either in flesh or virtually. All right, I see no hands raised, so we'll move on to the consent agenda, item 5, items A through D.
Mayor here.
Mr. Miller.
Move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Carter. Is there any comments? Please signify, if for approval, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we'll move on now to item 6 under other business. And the first item is item 6A. This is open for public comment. This is our access fiber internet update. Ms. Shu or Mr. Lindberg?
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Let me just go ahead and share my screen, just 1 second. Mayor, council, members of the audience, tonight I am pleased to provide the September 21 update on Access Anacortes fiber internet. This will look very similar to past months because we are just continuing to build on our business. And now you can see that in September, we have 863 customers in service and monthly revenues of over $57,000. There's been 33 new customers put into service since we met last month, and we'll talk more about that in detail as we move forward. In regard to our customer orders, there's two things that I would like to point out to you here. In our current service area, we have over 40.3% market share. As we were building our business plan, we were seeking a 35% market share. So we're very pleased that just a year into offering services that we have exceeded that. And the one item that you will notice that we have added back in is this partial installs. In the West End, we have started doing partial installs in preparation for full installation when the construction is completed on the West End. And we've gotten through more of the easier installs in our current service areas, we're doing more of the underground installs, which is a little bit slower pace than the aerial installs. In regard to our cash flow, what I would like to point out is that our operating cash flow is trending closer to break even. As you can see, this number is decreasing. This is in the first quarter of 2021. And then every month you can see, our operating expenses are decreasing some as our operating cash flow gets smaller and smaller. So we are getting closer to a break even for our operating expenses and cash flow. The green areas on the map indicate our 2020 service areas. Those are the service areas that we currently offer service to right now. And what I'm really pleased is that we continue to get daily orders. So I think that last month that I mentioned that we had 97 orders in queue for service in our current service area, and now there are 85. That's because every day we're getting new orders in, or perhaps somebody will move, and so we'll cancel a service because they've moved, but the new tenant that comes in or the new homeowner then signs up for service. And so it's a net zero, but we are continuing to provide that service. We continue to look for different funding opportunities, and we are awaiting the official application process through the state for the state's portion of the American Recovery Plan Act. When they initially came out and asked, is there a need for this? We brought forward two preliminary areas, the West End and Grandview, for $9.75 million request. The formal application is still forthcoming. The state was working on the NTIA grants first and are still getting back to us about when that application will be available. I wanted to talk more about our network expansion. Currently, work is underway in the West End that is moving along. We are utilizing the Savvy Bank line of credit for the funding, and also we'll be submitting this through the ARPA funding through the Washington State Broadband Office, like we were just speaking about. The next area is east of A Avenue. We often call this our EDA area. We have successfully received a grant for $2.25 million, and this will backfill the area from A Avenue eastward in our current service area. That construction, that design is underway right now, getting closer to being finished. And then we are hopeful that the construction and installations will occur in 2022. We are finding that the process with the working through the federal procurement and contracting is a bit more complex than how we've been doing it locally. We have the Guaymas View, which is east of Anacortes Mine Road to A Avenue. This is based on, it'll be based on getting grant funding secured for us to be able to do that in 2022. Otherwise, it will be pushed out to 2023. And we will also be committing this through the ARPA funding through the Washington State Broadband Office. Then the two remaining areas that we hope to serve, we'll just be kind of moving forward after we've backfilled the majority of the city limits, is the South Fidalgo area along the urban growth area, then goes along Highway 20 out to Marsh's Point in Burroughs Bay. So those both are dependent on grant funding because they are outside of the city limits. This is just another way to kind of look at those same areas and the different funding mechanisms, what the projected costs are for that build out, and how many premises we will be passing. We want to thank the West End. We recognize that living in an area where there's construction going on can get old quickly. We do have contractors out working regularly to get this work done. They're currently about 22% of the way in terms of having the trenching and the vault placement complete. When that is complete, they will then install the fiber. We have begun the outside portion of the installations in some neighborhoods and continue to work on securing easements to be able to do that work. This is an area where we will be passing 2,300 premises. We currently have 656 orders. So we, before we even have anybody fully installed yet, we have a 28.5% take rate. So we're continuing to accept pre-orders for service. And again, we acknowledge that it's difficult to live in a construction area and appreciate the patience that you're having with this, and know that you're available to contact us if you have a question or concern about it. We really are wanting to be good neighbors through the construction process. So this area down below in the peach is the area where that construction is underway now, passing 2,300 premises. We continue to work on some special projects since we spoke last month. Several of these projects have been going on for several months. We have the Rock Island Communications for 2 separate dark fiber leases. The Swinomish Indian Tribal Community is looking at a business class internet service. When we get out into the West End, Shannon Point Marine Center, as a part of Western Washington University, is looking for dedicated internet access. And we're working to continue to expand our internet service through a dark fiber lease at Island Hospital. Next week, we will be putting 2 additional City of Anacortes properties onto fiber, the Maritime Heritage Center and the Depot. So we're looking forward to finalizing that connection. Coming activity, we continue to work on that EDA grant application. The cultural resources study is complete. We are wrapping up the review period that's associated with that. And that will allow us to continue the process with the EDA to move forward with the actual grant in the RFP process. We are finalizing easements both in the West End with the homeowners associations and property owners. And just waiting from the Washington State Broadband Office to get that grant funding application through the ARPA funding, and continuing to follow lots of federal infrastructure legislation as it applies to broadband specifically. So one of my slides that showcases one of our vehicles is missing. I apologize that. So tonight I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. The City of Anacortes is operating as our own municipal fiber internet service as our own internet service provider. And we seek to differentiate ourselves from other service providers with our faster speeds, our lower prices, that we're locally run and are very reliable. So if you have any questions, we're always just a phone call away to be able to help answer those questions and to get you signed up. And Mr. McDougall, we would love to have you on. And so just waiting as part of that EDA area.
All
The
right.
day will come.
Council or members of the audience, any comments or questions?
Mayor Gare,
Mr. McDougall.
thank you for the report, Ms. Shu, and thank you also for highlighting at the end there that Access Anacortes fiber optic internet is the city's fiber optic network and internet service provider, and that is completely separate from any other fiber optic internet providers that may be operating in town. There is one that is advertising a lot in town, and just to call that out, that is a separate private corporation. The city of Anacortes' service is built and run by the city of Anacortes, so it is your community-owned network. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Carter?
Miller.
Miller, I couldn't see the voices. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Mayor. Great report, Ms. Shu. The take rate, again, still very happy. That's something I think everybody on council is looking at. But just to remind the public, you know, we've designed the financing of the system based around a take rate, and the importance of those EDA grants kind of takes away, or the grants that we're applying for take a lot of the risk out of the long-term ROI. So it's the take rate. We can do this with those kind of take rates, or better yet, reduce our ROI with grants. So appreciate that we're still pursuing those grants, and just that was just for kind of a little public education. The first dollar was really important. The break-even point, that's the next big step. So I appreciate you highlighting that one. So that's a really exciting milestone as well. And I think I had one, and thanks on the I went out and looked at some of the areas that there were a few complaints, and they looked pretty cleaned up to me, at risk of getting more complaints. But it looks like we quickly went out there, but construction's always challenging. So appreciate the patience of the neighbors out there in the West End. And I guess the question I had, the partial installs, I think that just really I think the question is that I'm guessing that just saves us a lot of time when we go back and do the final hookup, because we know that's what we're doing. So I think that's a question issue.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yes, what it does is that it continues to keep us moving forward, so that when we are fully able to get to the West End, we'll be, you know, several steps ahead. We'll already have that underground work done, so we can then go in and do just the inside construction. And by doing the outside work, we're not being as invasive in terms of going into people's homes at this point too. So as our COVID numbers have been quite high in the community, it's a safe place for our employees to be getting ready for us to be able to do those installs.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
No, I just wanted to comment and I think at this time, just to continue to speak to the fact of what this will do for our community, the advantage that we have. And just from a business perspective, it allows us to be able to recruit the type of industry we want here, small businesses that are choosing to have satellite locations. Those are going to be part of the future. Because of COVID, I think we've realized just how important it is, but also that it's doable. And I think having this high-speed ability for a small city like ours place us in such a unique position to attract businesses and industry. So I'm excited about that. And I just wanted to continue to put that out there as we look to try to create jobs, affordable jobs for people here in the area, such that they can also continue to afford homes in the area. All of those things are symbiotically working together. And so I'm very excited about what we're attempting to do right here and the possibilities for us going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Are there any other comments from the council or the audience? All right, at this time, we'll move on to item 6B. This is our Anacortes Community Forest Lands Management Plan update. This is discussion only this evening, and it is open for public comment.
Good evening, Mayor Gear and members of the council, members of the audience. Bob Oakes with the Parks Department, along with also the Parks Department. And we have a presentation tonight, just as Mayor Gear said, of the Anacortes Community Forest Lands Management and Comprehensive Plan. The plan has stood the test of time. It's been a real solid plan, and it's been a long time getting in front of you for this update. I don't think, yeah, there we go. We're getting back to I think there was one that said introduction. There it is. There's the front of it. All right. Well, you've seen it all now, so good night, and thank you very much. Anyway, what the goal of tonight is to basically kind of do just a broad brushstroke reminder of the plan, and really what we want to talk about with the council and Mayor Gear is kind of the nuts and bolts of how you would like to conduct the update of this plan. So with that, October 30th, 2014, which was a couple years ago, staff finished work on the ACO Comp Plan update draft, just like it says there. The Forest Advisory Board then approved it a few nights later, and here we are. Why did it take so long for us to get here? Why were we hiding this document from the council? We weren't, in fact, doing that. If you remember back when we brought the Parks Plan to you, we brought it along with the Forest Lands Plan, and the public wasn't super stoked about that happening together, and so we went ahead and separated the plans. We moved forward with the Parks Plan, which you approved, and then all kinds of things started getting onto the council docket, like the critical areas ordinance update and other important things. And so it just take a little while for us to get there in the queue, but here we are. And like I mentioned before, this plan has not seen a lot of changes in the 3+ decades that it has been around. So tonight, as I mentioned, here we are with our draft comp plan. It has been on the website for 7 years and available for people to take a look at. There are many options. A couple of them we have listed here. If you wanted the Forest Advisory Board to take another run through this thing with public comment, we could do that. We could just begin a public hearing process here with the council that you could set dates for, or my boss wasn't real supportive of my idea that you just go ahead and vote to approve the plan tonight, and we can all get on with our lives, but we probably won't be doing that. There are 25 pages of public comments that the Forest Board took during that update process. Those are also have been on the website, are easily accessed and reviewed. A lot of them have to do with dogs, I will say, and we can certainly prepare those in any manner that you would like. I know that planning has set a high bar of how comments are divided up and presented to you, and we can certainly do that with those, or we can start anew with public comments coming specifically to council. There is a one-page summary of the changes that were recommended. Based on those 25 pages of comments and the public process, you don't have to read this word for word right now, but as you can see, that 2014 update did not bring a lot of dramatic changes to the plan. Again, this has been a solid plan that the community has enjoyed, that the community has supported, and that we have felt good about as a Parks and Recreation Department over these years. it's just going to kind of run through the chapters here of the plan, not real specific because again, we won't get into the weeds here tonight. But there is a goal in the introduction of updating the plan every 5 years. We're going to try to do a little better job of that as staff. So I didn't want to gloss over that. The management areas, of course, we are extremely blessed with an abundance of acres of publicly owned woods, in addition to a fantastic parks and recreation system that John and I and our staff are lucky to be the current stewards of. And, you know, it's a great place to live. It's a great place to recreate. And it's a gigantic responsibility to take good care of it. And we want to make sure that as staff, we're doing all that we can for the elected officials so that you can take care of it. You know, the plan includes all the great things you want in a planning document, goals and policies and boundaries and restrictions and all that kind of stuff. And then I won't read off all the acres to you, but as we put forward here, you can be reminded of how many of them there are and just how many of the almost those 3,000 acres of woods that we have really set us apart as a community. And we are truly a recreation leader and really beacon of light for the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Our forest land stewardship chapter, of course, gets into our forest management, the flora, the wildlife, and the water resources. We, of course, work very closely with our planning department in terms of how the new critical areas ordinance update affects what we do and how we do it. We spend a lot more time planning what we used to think of as very small and insignificant maintenance projects than we used to. And we've really broadened our scope there in terms of who we reach out to and then how we move forward. You know, the management of the recreational activities, you know, we are extremely unique in that we have a shared trail system. You know, I've talked to a lot of trail professionals throughout my career that just think this is crazy and how could you ever do this and put all these different user groups into one space. And, you know, it's something we've been doing in this town for a long, long time, and it's something we sure hope to continue to do. And yeah, do we have our occasional dust-ups amongst groups? Sure we do, but we have worked very hard on how to share the trails, how to use them in a healthy manner, and reached out to those groups. And you know, as you get into the appendix of this plan, you see the specifics of the comprehensive trail plan. It really lays it out pretty clearly how we've gotten here. And how we continue to share our, and not just our trails, but like in this photo, you know, people climbing the mountain. So there's a lot out there even beyond just what we do on our trail system. Management procedures. One of the things that we're hoping to talk about and potentially change when it talks about our Forest Advisory Board membership, and those are 5 citizens that the mayor appoints and the council confirms to help keep us in line at the staff level and help bring citizen concerns forward. We've always mandated that one of the members of that Forest Advisory Board also serve as a planning commission member. You know, that was put into place when there was a lot more undeveloped private land in Anacortes. And you know, now you can see most of the property lines of the community forest lands pretty clearly. And, you know, we don't think it's as mission critical to have a member of the planning commission serve on the forest board. And, you know, as much work as it is to find people willing to volunteer for things like the planning commission, we'd like to potentially, you know, lighten that burden a little bit and find somebody that would like to serve, that doesn't necessarily have to serve in both groups. And that's something that we will certainly discuss further with you as staff and council. Fire protection, that is certainly a topic that the community continues to take a great interest in as we look around the world, not just here in the Western United States, but you know, it's something we take very seriously as a city. We work very closely with our fire department. You are probably aware that we do pay an annual fire patrol tax to the Department of Natural Resources. The most recent one was a $921 and some cents bill, and you know what that does is that makes us a priority when we do have a wildfire. We've had two in this summer. We had one on Cap Santa and one out at Washington Park. You know, that gets DNR here, and it gets DNR's best people here. When I was talking with Jack Kennedy recently about our fire on Mount Erie, which was, you know, a year ago this summer, and I asked him, I said, you know, without that fire tax, what's the bill we're going to get from DNR when we get a hot shot crew on the ground and we have a helicopter going around the clock up there? And he said, well, that bill probably would have been somewhere between $10,000 and $100,000. So that $921 we're paying annually is a great investment, and it does help bring some of the top professional wildfire fighters to our fires. And of course, our own staff at the Anacortes Fire Department is trained in the wildfire fighting, as is the Mount Erie Department. So, you know, we've got a lot of people right here in the city and on the island that get there first, and then DNR comes in and makes sure of it. And, you know, but that's something I have no doubt we will be discussing further as we update this plan. In the appendices, you've got things, you know, like the history, you know, the old logging practices, the amazing conservation easement program that kicked off and the council approved in 1998 with not a small degree of skepticism, as I remember that night. And boy, the success of that program, when people are walking into City Hall and writing you checks voluntarily, that's a pretty good deal. And we have seen an incredible positive response to that plan, and it's raised a ton of money, and it's another just remarkable story about this community and the way people care about where they live and how they like to protect it. As I mentioned before, you got your comprehensive trail use plan in there. It talks about the Heart Lake State Park, you know, deeded that acreage to the city. You know, we started talking to them in the late 90s, and that process was wrapped up in 2002. And then, of course, there's a variety of maps that show different uses for different trails. Just a little smattering of current topics. Most of these aren't going to be new to any of you, but some of the things that we talk about, staff level, and of course like so many public meetings over the last year and a half, our forest board meetings have been a little sporadic, but we're getting back in the groove there. You know, so we have continued to work hard with our longtime partner, the Friends of the Forest. As the council, you have budgeted money for their education program for a long, long time. And there are generations of people that have grown up in this town that can still tell you what their animal was they got assigned to in 7th grade, and, you know, where they went on their 3rd grade field trip. And, you know, that's been, you know, you don't often have the government agency and the Friends group coming together as partners. But we have done that together as a community, and it has made our woods stronger and more interesting and much more of a resource than they would have been just standing on their own. We work closer and closer with the Samish Nation here. Obviously, their native lands are where we are and what we're doing our best to contribute to the care of. And we, you know, Steve Phillips, who's our lead in the ACFL, he and Denise Crow, who works with the Samish Nation, hike together once a month, and she has imparted her 30 years of local naturalist knowledge to him and to me, for that matter. And the city on all different levels has a lot of great things going on with the Sandwich. Wildfire, we've talked about. E-bikes are a new toy, and you see a lot of them on the roads in Anacortes now, and you see more and more of them in the forest lands. And some people think it's the greatest thing ever to come along, and other people have some real concerns about a whole new user group in the forest lands. And so that's something we're still working on at the forest board level, but I have a feeling that discussion will find its way into the update of this plan with you. Our visitor numbers during the pandemic, I'm sure most of you saw some of that. They were gigantic. When the state and the federal lands shut down, we did not. And Mayor Gear wanted to make sure that her community had a place to go and get outside and enjoy themselves. And unfortunately, some other people found out about that and came and joined us. And we, that summer of 20 was, of course, interesting in so many ways for so many people. But boy, we had numbers like we had never seen before. And that's had some impact. And we're dealing with that impact. And we're doing our best to educate people and to work on our trails, make sure we're going forward in a very positive manner. The Whistle Lake Dam, I think we talked about a little bit with the council. I don't have any new information for you tonight on that front, but that is certainly a project that we're working on with Public Works, and there will be more information for you on that front as that information comes to us. Like I said, this picture is about 2007, John, and there's a lot of old time ACFL celebrities in that picture. You start to look through it, and the John Tersey Art Commode, Gene Murphy trifecta right there in the middle of the front is. Those are some pretty special people, and you could tell an incredible story about every single one of those folks in that photo. It truly is a community forest lands. It's an honor for me personally to kind of have a second run at managing them, and with that, John is here as well, and we can certainly talk about what the council would like to do with this plan, or what you'd like us to prepare to bring to you, or how you kind of like that to go forward. So that's as much of your time as I need to take up, other than answering questions and writing down instructions.
Thank you, Bob. So let's start. I'd like to hear from the members of the audience first, if you have any thoughts, and then we'll move to the council for questions. Brian Wetcher, your hand is up. Welcome. Go ahead, turn your mic on and you can talk to us.
Am I speaking to you now?
You are. We can hear you, and we see you and your
you.
lovely wife on the camera.
And you would see that picture also if you looked at the picture with John a few minutes ago. We were both right in the center. Just to speak from experience, I've been involved in all of the comp plans for the city forest lands over the duration since we've had an ACFL. And I can tell you this plan that we have in front of you is probably the most vetted comprehensive land use plan that the city has ever seen. As Bob mentioned, it's been 10 years. I've been involved with this plan for 10 years in bringing it forward now to this point. And with all due respect, it's been in this form on file within the city since 2016. I think everybody that needed an opportunity to see this, to make a decision about it, has probably had that opportunity to see it. And once again, with all due respect, council members, I would urge you to pass this forward as is, as soon as possible, so that we can get on with the management plan within the ACFL. This is a I'm not saying this is the best plan we ever had, but this is a really good plan. And it was well updated. The public process was extremely thorough. As some of the council members may know, Ms. Moulton was actually on the board at that time and could give you a recommendation for this plan as well as I could. I believe that this is the best plan that you will have. If you want to update it in the future, we're very close to another update. But you can't update a plan unless you've approved a plan. So please go ahead and approve this plan. Let us move forward. Updates can be applied every year through the comprehensive land use plan update programs and or through the normal update process within, I believe it's within 2 years now. So please go ahead and pass this well thought, well publicized, well reviewed program now, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there anyone else in the audience or online? I have the Anacortes Food Co-op with their hand up. Go ahead and turn on your mic and talk to us. Are you there? I see your mic's not quite on.
Okay, I think I'm on now.
Yep, we can hear you. And can you state your
I
name?
apologize, it says Anacortes Food Co-op. This is Sarah Hollahan. I live at 1511 38th Street, Anacortes.
Hi, Sarah.
So I am very close to the Heart Lake area, and I'm so thankful for the forest lands. And I had a couple of things. One is Bob mentioned that the plan would be updated every 5 years. However, it sounds like this plan is already 5 years old. So my concern is, are you really working on the comments and the concerns and the planning from 2016? Because as we know, quite a few things have changed climate-wise. One other thing that he did not mention was there is a group called Transition Fidalgo, who has been working with the parks and doing some assessments of the health of the trees in the forest. And I think that'd be really important to mention them for all that good work those citizen scientists are doing. And secondly, I hope that we will move forward a little faster to get some trails that are more wheelchair accessible. Because in all my travels through the trails in the park land, the forest land, I don't see that many trails that population can use, and that is super important. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hollahan. Anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council? All right. Brian, did you put your hand up again? Okay.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to add, in addition to Bob's comments about e-bikes, to clarify the current policy that the board voted to enforce quite recently was that e-bikes are considered a motorized bike and are currently under board policies restricted to the same trails that motorcycles would be restricted to use. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, I'm going to take it back to the council at this time. Council, comments, discussion.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Hey, thanks for the great presentation. I guess the thing that was a little bit missing is kind of the history of the plan, because even I'm kind of lost. I know it's a great plan. You know, it's doing justice to our forest lands now. I think somewhere along the way, the plan kind of fell to the side, like you talked about. But maybe we need to take advantage of our citizen planners, also known as the Planning Commission, and I guess I'm partial to that. So partial to the Planning Commission, having served on it with a number of council members here, that their role, and I'm not talking about the individual issue that you brought up about whether a planning commissioner is on the forest board, but I think we have a process for all of our comprehensive plans, and I don't know if I have the comfort level of that it's gone through the planning commission, whether it's on the 5-year cycle. And you know, do you have to make the 5-year cycle? Obviously, we decided we didn't need to make the 5-year cycle because it's a good plan that worked. But still, we should attempt to get all of our plans through a normal process, whether it's a greatest plan ever or whether it's the worst plan ever. And that usually goes through the planning commission. So I'm just interested in the thoughts on that process.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So this plan went to the Planning Commission in probably about 2019, pre-COVID. And the big questions there was the potential for a bike skills park at the Avenue landfill. And they promoted that on to you with that question still there for council to decide, if y'all remember back then. I know a lot of things have transpired before then. So the Planning Commission, it did go through the Planning Commission, and they approved it for you to consider, and then COVID hit, and so we stopped.
Gotcha. Thank you for that refresher. I now recall. Thanks.
Okay.
Mayor Gear?
Sorry, Mr.
Yes,
Miller, I should have included that in my presentation.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vokes, for that good presentation. I appreciate the refresher that you gave. Having been a member of the Forest Advisory Board during that time period, I do remember it as a good plan that was very examined and scrutinized and commented on. And then I think I would like to give it another quick read. But I think it would be great if it came forward to council as is for us to look at and then decide from there to vote on. And I think that there are things that will come up that will need to be addressed. I appreciate that Mr. Wetcher brought up that electric bikes are motorized bikes and they are treated as such in the forest lands. I think sometimes there's a little confusion about that. So I appreciate that being mentioned publicly. And so I am in favor of it coming forward as passed by the Planning Commission and taking action on it as a council. Thanks.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Mr. Young.
No, I just wanted to comment again and to commend Mr. Vokes for such a wonderful presentation and the small anecdotes of levity that I think you do so well, Bob. But I agree with Mr. Welcher and as well as my esteemed colleague, Ms. Moulton, for moving this forward and coming to council. I would like, however, to express I'd like us to discuss e-bikes just a little bit, only because my concern with e-bikes and not allowing them or having places that they can go is that such a large portion of our population is above an age group with some limitations. And although e-bikes are electric, they're also require the muscles to use them in the park. So I'm just a little concerned. I want to make sure we're not leaving those people out in this particular demographic, which is, I believe, 40% of our town. I just want to make sure that we're not overlooking places they can go because they can't use the other bikes with any, normalcy. And I just want to make sure we're including them. And I understand the purpose of making sure we're not having motorcycles or, those larger things tearing up the park. And so I would love just a little bit of clarity as to how we can address that or what might be some places we can apply that. And then lastly, one of the things that I would like for us to talk about at some point, we're really going to need to also begin to discuss how to make sure our parks are not being loved to death. And I know that that's something that's come up before. I know people love it. We do. We're encouraging people to come and participate. But I want to make sure that we are also cognizant of that going forward, that we can ensure that the parks has got all the tools that it needs in order to help us preserve the very thing that we love and the very thing that we want to continue to enjoy. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. All right, is there any other discussion? Ms. Cleland?
Yeah, Mayor Gary, thank you. I was remembering back on 2019. It seems so long ago, and I was on Planning Commission when this came forward. There was the plan itself was well received, had wide ranging support. We got hung up for a number of meetings when it came to the skills course and how that would be integrated in or left out of this plan. And I believe it's no longer in the plan because that's kind of off the table now. So that is good. My concern was when I was listening to the presentation was that 2016 mark and have we had the advisory board take another look at it within the last couple years, have the public been able to comment in the last couple years. And 2019 is, yes, 2 years ago, but in reality, it got through Planning Commission. It hit COVID, and unfortunately, there's this like dark hole of about 18 months. And so I would say I am comfortable moving this forward to council for approval the way it is. I also agree with what Mr. Wetcher said. If we need to make modifications, we are allowed to, and we need to, I think, use that tool both with the planning department and in this situation more often so that we do get our plans approved in a timely manner and they don't continue on 2, 3, 5, 7 years beyond. Bringing up the issue of e-bikes, I don't necessarily think this is the time we have to hash that out, but I do think Mr. Young brings up a good point that e-bikes, there are a variety and there's a wide range of what an e-bike looks like and how it's used. And I think that requires a more nuanced conversation as to what types of e-bikes and more, it has less, to me, at least from my limited understanding of e-bikes, it has less to do with the fact that there is a power assist and more about how it impacts the trail and other folks around the person on the bike. So I don't, it makes me I would agree, it makes me concerned that the advisory board has kind of determined they can only be on motorcycle trails. I don't think that should be the final say without public comment, because I do think there are a lot of bikes that you wouldn't even know have some assist to them, and the bicyclist using that technology is equally respectful of the forest lands. So I think that's something that should probably be set aside and brought forward at another time. But this plan should be approved. The other thing that I do have concern for is the influx of users and the fact that there's a lot more folks kind of interacting with each other on the trail, at the lakes, taking advantage of our amazing spaces. And what does that look like? Is that going to require more kind of park rangers or presence from city staff in some capacity? And I think that's something that I would be more than willing to have come forward for discussion in the future. But as is, I think this plan is great. It's been vetted. It's always nice to hear from folks that are on the advisory board saying that, yep, we're still good with it. So I'm fine moving it forward as is.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller?
Just one more on the comment. When we move it forward to city council, which of course I support, again, I just want it to be like all the other plans where you have the planning commission recommendations, et cetera, their comments as well, that we were able to look at that. But I think the council is more than capable of discussing the final outcome of this plan.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what I've heard from the council and the audience is that this plan will be brought back to the council. We'll move it forward. All right, thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to item 6C. This is a contract award for a census water meter software, number 21-136-WTR-001. This is a discussion item this evening with possible action. And we have Mr. McDaniel with us from the water treatment plant. Welcome, Brian.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, bringing forward the agreement for the census water meters AMI, bringing it back, brought some additional information for Council's consideration this evening. I will briefly go through some of the talking points that we had prior for the audience tonight, maybe seeing this for the first time. What we're talking about is I want to make sure that I get that screen share correct. What we're talking about is an automated meter reading infrastructure software platform for our water meters. What this does, this moves our water meter reading system from a manual drive-by system to a cloud-based system. The agreement in front of us tonight is for the software that manages that cloud-based software. Hearing from council last time bringing this forward, the discussion was we needed a little more information for the basis for the system. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the benefits for that and maybe throw some figures to that of why we would want to move forward with this product. At a high level, we will talk a little bit about risk reduction. There are some water conservation things that come along with this platform that's helpful. It improves our customer service, and there's some expandability to the system as well. But talking a little bit about the risk reduction itself, the reduction of risk having information and data that is minute by minute versus 30-day-old data helps reduce our risk. What this does is provides us information such as if a water meter is spinning backwards, it notifies crews immediately. Whereas during the current day system, we would be waiting 30 days to get that information. What comes along with this platform, there are additional water conservation tools. These conservation tools are basically informing city staff that perhaps a water meter has kept spinning for 24 hours. If a customer is able to understand that a meter has been spinning for 24 hours without stopping, city staff could contact them and let them know, hey, you potentially have a leak. With that type of tool, that helps improve the customer service. Whereas in the past, it would be 30 days of that meter spinning with a high bill. We could actually grab that and reduce that and conserve water in addition to provide better customer service. There are some things with the bill discrepancies with this platform that helps our customer service folks work with our customers if there is a bill discrepancy to be able to have information on hourly reads that moving to this type of platform will help with. One of the big advantages of the system is that instant availability of information. We look at when a customer comes to City Hall and they move in or are signing up for new service and moving out, in today's system, we would have to send a service person out to gather that information, bring it back to City Hall, create a bill, and then do the service change out. With this type of system, we can do that effectively at a moment's notice from the computer terminal. We do approximately 390 of those yearly. We're estimating the savings alone from this function to be around $70,000. This is one aspect of the system where we can actually put a financial or a fiscal thing to a savings that we will see. So in addition to the savings that we're demonstrating here, the reduction of risk, I think, is probably the biggest bang for the buck that we will realize from the system. And it's getting that information back to staff to be able to manage hydraulically our water system.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about staffing hours and vehicle costs. Since we're talking about savings, that $70,000 on your previous slide, I imagine some of that's staff time, right? So do you have an estimate of staffing hours and vehicle cost changes with the new system being in place?
So if I understand the question correctly, so an understanding with the new system in place, how we came up with the 70,000 estimated savings for the system launch?
No, more that, do you know how else that this, I mean, I see the benefits here and the risk reduction, but so as I understand it, currently staff drives around in trucks and they pick up signals as they go by the home and the meter, and this is all going to be done remotely. So does that save the city in terms of staff hours or, vehicle costs, gas costs, things like that? Is that something that's factored in generally too? Like, will we have more staff time based on this, or does it require more staff time? Or would there be someone who doesn't have to drive around that could do other things in the Public Works Department? That's my question.
That's a great question, and thanks for helping me understand that. So you're exactly correct. So the hours that are typically spent driving around with collecting those meter reads, today we spend approximately 2 days a month collecting those meter reads. That staff time and the vehicle costs will be reallocated to other functions within the utility. Hopefully that answered the question.
It does. So essentially it'll be the same amount of staff. This won't require more staff and it won't eliminate staff. So basically it's sort of a net zero effect that way.
Yes, neutral.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, thanks for that.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young?
No, I just wanted to follow up on Ms. Moulton's question. And Brian, you really are answering it. I just felt that the public would benefit the public as well as myself, but just a little bit more on the analysis of cost effectiveness, meaning that I see the possibility, the instantaneous benefit to not only if detecting if there's a problem, but also, to staff time, to vehicle maintenance, wear and tear, and all those things like that. But just was curious about when you were saying it would save about 2 days per month. I guess sometimes in these things, it would benefit me if when we do our comparison, we say this is what it will save the city. And so what that does is juxtapose this new advantage versus what we already have, because we're always looking for ways to squeeze our dollars at the city to make the most of it. So I totally get it, but I just think sometimes it's a little bit important if we elaborate a little bit further, not only for us, but for the public in that way.
Yes, thank you. Try to speak to that a little bit about some of the savings or things that you will actually realize. It's the improvement in customer service. Whereas what prior took 1 or 2 days, we're effectively able to do now from a computer terminal. So I like to talk about the water bill. And a customer calls in and they explain it, hey, I received a high bill. With this type of system, where you'll see the switch and the conversion over time, that the utility billing staff, when they're talking to the customer, they can look at the water usage in real time before there's a problem. So whereas current day, we would see your bill come in and the problem would have happened perhaps 28 days ago, this system would technically alert you that there was something going on, and we would interact in a positive way with the customer in advance of it becoming an issue. For instance, if someone left a garden hose on for 2 or 3 days, this system would actually alert you and you could contact your customer and advise them of that. So where it's going to save maybe some of the physical trucks rolling down the highway, you're actually going to pick up more work on the customer service side from the utility billing side. And Mr. Young, I hope that added a little bit to your conversation.
It does, and I really appreciate that because I do think customer service is important. Being sort of a B school person, what I'm looking for, and I'm sure you will address it in this because I'm seeing these costs, and then there's a second cost associated with the meters, and I do believe that the funding for that will come from a specific pot. But the thing that I'm looking for going forward with any presentations, really just in any ask, is just that comparison of what we are getting dollar for dollar versus what it will cost us. And even though it may be something we want to go to, it may not be as urgent as the moment. I personally support this, but I just think that sometimes it's very important for us to say the cost that we're expending in its existing state versus the changes that we're proposing. And then we look at the cost of the two of them together, and then we make a decision. So I hear your presentation. I'm very supportive, and I just wanted to kind of bring that up for future presentations in any of the departments, at least what I will ask for as a council person. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so talk a little bit about the project scope, and I'm going to call up a spreadsheet that hopefully will answer some of Mr. Young's questions as well. But I wanted to brief a little bit what the scope of the project looks like. This system will require some capital investments for the installation of 5 antenna sites. We will need to procure the software. That's what we're talking about this evening, is actually procuring the software. We will need to replace about 5,500 radios and then modify a couple of meter box lids that are almost incidental at this point through our evaluation. A little bit about the cost breakdown. The total project, we heard council give us feedback that, hey, it would be very helpful to understand what a total project this thing is going to cost us. So what we looked at is that the total cost of the project of $1.9 million over a period of 5 years. Within that, there is a credit. We have to change the radio systems out on the water meters, and they're going to credit us back about $194,000. In 2021, we anticipate to spend $286,000 on installing the first antenna at City Hall. These are maintenance and operation monies that we've allocated in the 2021 budget. And then looking forward, as we move through the progression of implementing this software and this system, in the capital facilities plan, we plan to put $100,000 into installing an antenna and some radio units in 2022 on the 29th Street Reservoir, and then 23 through 25 install the remaining antennas and the rest of the conversions of those radios.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. I'm curious about the antenna. I don't want to get too much into it, but are they like 100 feet tall? Like, are they just like, I mean, what do they look like? They're all going to be on city property, right? So we don't need any easements or anything. That won't be a cost, but is it What does it look like, the antenna? Like, what will I see when I, come down Whistle Lake Road and ride by the reservoir?
That's a great question, thank you. The antennas, the proposed one on City Hall, the question came up during a committee meeting that it is a temporary base, on a temporary base, and the antenna itself is about 10 feet tall on top of City Hall. We chose City Hall just based on the location and the least amount of impact and the most bang for your buck, if you will. Each antenna collects water meter reads, and it connects to certain water meters in a geographic range. City Hall happens to be placed in one of those perfect areas, of course, that it will reach approximately 5,000 meters. So that antenna, the diameter of the antenna is similar to what you might see on the top of it's a single pole. It's not a big branched antenna. I wish I had a photo of one of those, and I'll probably have to bring one of those. I can share with council afterwards as a follow-up.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But like knowing it's 10 feet tall and not, 50 or 100 is pretty helpful information.
Yeah, and the antenna, I'll show a slide here in a minute, that antenna heights, they're about 60 feet tall on a single wood pole is how tall they are. And the sites that have been chosen to place those antennas are within reservoir sites.
Okay. Oh yeah, sometime I would like to see a picture, but sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. We'll get that for you.
Can I ask a question too? This is Christine.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I see the cost for the first one on City Hall is a couple $100,000 or almost 300,000. The next one's 100,000. The following three, do we have a cost estimate for those?
Yes, we do, and they're included in the 1.9. And
Okay.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. And then, I mean, I guess City Hall is a 10-foot one on 29th Street. Is that on a wood pole then, and then to achieve the 60-foot height?
That's correct. That's on
Okay.
a wood pole at the reservoir site itself.
So
Okay.
how, Brian, how tall is a reservoir?
Mayor Gear, that's a great question. It's approximately about 40 feet tall.
40,
Each one
okay.
is different.
So I'm trying to give us a perspective of how tall it would be next to the reservoir. So it'll be another 20 feet maybe?
It will be
Okay.
60 feet, so about 20, 30 feet above the reservoir on 29th Street.
All right, thank you.
Something that I wanted to point out with this particular slide, that there are costs associated with this system that we would have already included in our maintenance and operation program. So about 1.2 million, we've already going to spend that in our regular maintenance and operation. But we're including it as part of this project as an overall cost so we can understand what the entire project is going to cost us.
So if we chose not to do this system, how long is the present system sustainable, and maybe what the annual cost of that is, what's the shelf life? So, eventually we have to do something.
Correct. That's a great question. So the shelf life, we're estimating $1.2 million we will be spending in replacement of the existing system without the antennas.
If we just maintain what we have.
If we just maintain it
So
over a
if we-
period of time.
So for another 700, we can have this new technology.
That's
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. Moulton?
So is that maintenance already in is that something that would be part of the existing capital facilities plan? And I don't know if we have the answer to the question of how long we would expect the current system to last with that kind of investment.
So that's a great point, and I'm going to pardon my technical expertise running the PowerPoint here. So I think council will find this helpful if I can make it work. So the entire project, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm hoping that my screen share is functional. We've broken this down to the total project of 1.9 million. And that's spread over 5 years. The radio credit was 194,000. We expect the project to cost us 1.7 by backing out the 194,000. The maintenance and operation portion of the budget is our costs that we would have spent regardless whether we go to the software as a system, the AMI platform, which gives us a total out of 410,000 to install the antennas and the other infrastructure. So,
Mayor,
Mr. Young,
Mayor,
Mr.
well,
Young.
no, you know, while Brian, Mr. McDaniel, you're on that discussion about the, I think where it says the M&O radio change out, and I guess what I was looking for, and I'm hoping it may be in this presentation or not, that will be something I would be looking for, is that when we say that there are going to be costs that we will incur either way, what I'm hoping I can hear you tell me a little bit about is over what period of time and what are some of those costs. Because if we're saying, let's just say we put it off for 5 years, you know, we choose to put it off for 5 years, I'm curious, what are our maintenance costs for these next 5 years associated with this process? Because if it saves us 2 days per month, that's 24 days a year. And then I was looking at those costs. So I guess what I'm looking at is I think the mayor used the term useful life or life cycle. I'm just curious, over what period of time are we talking, 5 or 10 years? This is what it'll cost us, because it would allow us, I think, to compare cost of the immediacy versus cost of something we may want to look at a little bit later. Thank you.
the life expectancy of the current meter radios that are in there were installed circa 2003, 2010. They roughly have a 15-year to 20-year battery life. And so we are 3/4 of the way through a change-out program, or I apologize, about 40% through that change-out program at our current state. So as we progress forward over the time of replacement of those radios with the batteries, we will have expended $129 or $1.2 million for those expenditures.
So are the radios with the batteries, is that a technology that's going away? So even if we can't replace them, is at some point we won't be able to do that?
And that is one of the great things about the proprietary radios. You get to change the entire radio unit to change the batteries.
Okay.
And the technology, the requirement for the change out, the current technology that was installed in 2003, 2010, that technology is phased out. It's hard to believe that technology won't last 10 years. But with that, that's why we were receiving some of that credit. So those radios have to change out because they upgraded the technology, and their commitment to the city was, as you change those, we'll give you a credit for those radios. It's a great question.
So with that in mind, how long are we expecting if we move forward with this new technology? What is the usable life of these radios and these antenna? Because the antenna are quite expensive. Is this what's on the horizon for the foreseeable future, or can you give a little insight to that? And then my other question is, since I've got you, is there's the $35,000 a year in ongoing costs for software maintenance. Do we have something comparable to that in our current situation, or would that kind of be what that $70,000 savings is because they're having to drive around?
That's another great question. The existing software that we are using, it cost us in the neighborhood of $3,000, and it sits on our own server with our own data. When we move to the software as a service platform, we're paying to have the data hosted by a third party, and that's the census contract, which is in front of us today. The question about the capital plan and what that looks like, we have the top portion budget for the 2021, which is our maintenance and operation budget. I highlighted this over on the left-hand side here to try to communicate what does that look like in 2021. So in 2021, with the maintenance and operation money that we already have budgeted, we have software procurement for $45,000, $34,000 to install the antenna. There's some training money in there, in addition to about $50,000 worth of radio changeouts within that first 2021. So tonight, we're asking that council review the software as a service agreement, which will carry us through 2025. And as we move to 2022 budget, which is the capital facilities plan, which has not been approved yet, which will still go in front of council, we're anticipating a $300,000 budget in 2022 which includes the annualized software of $29,000, $100,000 to install an antenna at 29th, $130,000 worth of radio changeouts, and then there's some design and permitting money within that budget for a total budget of about $309,000. Moving forward through the capital plan, which is the proposed capital plan as we see it, that we fund the first year of the CFP with $300,000, and then as we move forward through that capital facilities plan, we ramp that up to $500,000 in 23, and then $500,000 in 24, and an additional $500,000 in 25 to complete the project. So we tried to take a look at this as an entire project rather than just piecemealing it together.
Mayor,
Mr. Young.
just following up on my question, and I love technology. I really do, and I want to say this up front. But what I need you to show me is that we've already used up about 40% of this technology that we currently have, and there's a 60% left. And what we're being asked to spend in this new technology is roughly $1.7 million. And so what I'm looking for is that worth the customer service that you're mentioning? Or how does that relate to the savings to the city in the immediacy of now versus a later wait? And secondarily to that, I'm still not quite clear on the cost per year to maintain the existing system, knowing that we still have a 60% useful life later. And I'm just trying to weigh those costs, because that will help me make a decision about the immediacy of now versus later. That's what I'm trying to get to. So forgive me, but that's really where the question lies for me.
So Brian, from what you've told me and what I've heard today is $1,296,000 over 5 years to maintain the present, per year or over 5 years?
Over 5 years.
Okay, so that would be about $245,000 a year to maintain our present system. And what you've told us is to bring in a new system would cost an additional $410,000 divided over, so it'd be another $90,000 a year to bring in a new system.
That answered my question, Mayor Gibb, because that first part over 5 years was what I missed, the cost. And so that answered it for me, and so I'm very happy.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. I have a calculator here, so. Okay, other questions for Mr. McDaniels?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller?
I was going to let him finish his presentation, but are you almost wrapped up? So I can try to wrap up the since we got you off track a couple weeks ago over software, but I'll let you finish up.
I can.
Where were you?
I can be wrapped up. Yes, thank you. Let's open it up for some questions.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
So yeah, I thank you, Mayor, for wrapping up the cost over time. Clearly, we were trying to figure, and that's why we got off track because you came with a software contract
Right.
that was kind of in isolation, and we asked about the antennas, but now I think we've got the understanding. We're talking about $1.2 million over the next 4 years. That's your normal maintenance, replacing radios, meters, using the old system. You're looking to add about 400,000 over the next 4 years. That includes the software. You almost had me on the antennas. I was all in until you told me the price of our current software, and now going from 3,000 to, so I was all in until you gave me that big number. So now we have to make the evaluation, is that money worth it to get all those customer service benefits of, and I think it probably is, that's 8% down to 2% for leakage, $70,000 annually. I think I'm almost there on that argument, but give me a little more on what we're getting for $30,000 a year versus $3,000 one-time expense on software.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That's a great question. So I'll elaborate a little bit on your water system manager sleeping at night. So what I haven't really highlighted was the fact that this is a risk reduction method as well. And it's really hard to put a total monetary amount on what you're getting for that risk reduction. So in the big scheme of things, I like to talk about when an alarm goes off, maybe on a weekend, maybe it's Seahawks Monday Night Football, and an alarm goes off and it alerts your water staff that there is something that's not right within the water distribution system. That something not right might be an indication of a broken water main. That indication may be something, heaven forbid, a contamination of the water system. The existing $2,500 system that we are using today, we would not have that information or have that available to staff for 30 days, potentially 30 days. With this particular system, that cost, what we're trading off is the ability to respond and reduce the risk of a contamination, keeping our water system clean and safe. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, Council, any other questions for Mr. McDaniel? And I don't know if you're ready to take any action tonight or you want to continue this on.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, I guess I decided to leap in given all the silence. but I guess the real question is, are we really ready to move forward? Are there additional questions we want answered? Do we want time to think about it? And I think that's what you're asking us right now.
Yep.
Yep. And
Where you're
so
at.
there you go. There you go. So, I can honestly go either way. I would go with the majority of council. I guess my only thing was these costs. But after you've explained it the way you did and Brian explained it, and I'm clear on that these are accumulating costs, over these years, I'm okay with moving forward. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Mayor Gear,
Miss Cleland.
I was waiting for Mr. Young to say something, so thank you for starting it off. I guess I really appreciated the presentation today and the actual numbers and the breakdown of all the components of the project. I feel much more comfortable with what this project is and have a better grasp of kind of the complexities of it. I mean, if we're talking that the 5,000 and some radios have to be replaced regardless, and it's a $1.2 million cost, and there doesn't really seem to be a way to get around it. Now we're dealing with about a $700,000 project for approval. That I mean, I guess to me that's a little bit more. To break it down in that manner means that I can wrap my head around it. The $70,000 in savings per year is great, but it seems a little hazy if we're also still though adding the $35,000 in kind of the cloud-based software that is going to be an ongoing cost. So, you know, that some of those numbers get kind of massaged around. Regardless, if we're talking about the $70,000 or the $700,000 amortized over 10 years, it starts to kind of get a little more comfortable. I think it's incredibly important that we have safe water. I think it's incredibly important that we are on the forefront of preserving and not wasting water. So if that helps it, I think our community, you know, when we start to see leaks or whatnot, it's a good direction to go. I'm fairly comfortable with moving forward with this technology as long as this is these antenna, which is really the big cost beyond the $200,000 for the initial software and the $35,000 for cloud-based. That's still a big chunk. So we're talking 500,000 or so for these different antennas, which my numbers are probably off. But I just want to make sure that those antennas are worth the investment and are going to at least, you know, be used for 20 years or something like that. That's kind of my concern, that the life of this system is going to last. When the last system we had, we were getting a couple $100,000 credit because now it's obsolete, but we haven't gotten through that lifetime of use. So that's kind of where I'm at to share with the rest of council. I don't know what you all feel. So
Mayor Gear.
there you go.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, well, Mayor, I think you had the calculator out, and the way I have it was about 400,000 over the 4 years. And the big costs of that are the software increases of about 30 to 40,000 a year, and the construction of antennas, because the software, it's kind of useless to buy this fancy software if we don't do the antennas. So, and again, so for me, it's about, we've got to do $1.2 million over 4 years, no matter what. Now it's going to be $1.8 million. I think the experts, being in our water department, have made a convincing case that expense, both in safety, leakage, some expense saving, modernization of the system, I think the case has been made. And with that, I'll make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a contract 21-136 with Ferguson Waterworks in the amount of $195,712 for census water meter software.
Second.
We had a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Ms. Cleland McGrath for approval of the census water meter software number 21-136 WTR-001. Any additional comments?
Mayor Gear,
Ms. Moulton.
quick question. Wish I had asked it earlier. Mr. McDaniel, do we know of other municipalities that are using this technology?
Yes, there are several municipalities within our region using this exact same technology. As of late, there was a paper just released for the city of Monroe. They launched their system in 2017, and they were able to illustrate how they took their water loss down. In the presentation, you saw that they had one utility reported had 8% water loss or unaccounted for water, and they reduced it to 2%. That is a Washington utility right close to us using this exact platform as a case study. And I can share that case study if you would like that as well.
Great. Just knowing that what you just have told us is super helpful. And maybe one thing that I would suggest as a possibility is that we get some reports on what we've done, the successes that we have in adopting this system, in leakage reduction and customer service. I think that would be really helpful to hear back about.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
Mayor
right,
Gear.
Mr. Miller.
And again, that's not without some risk with buying the software before we see what the antenna looks like. So I will, acknowledge that that's a risk. But if you tell us that those antennas are going to be not terribly intrusive because they're going to be on top of City Hall, 10 feet, and then so that is a risk as well. But I still support the contract.
Okay. All right, Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, we're going on to item 6D. This is a contract award for the Grandview Cemetery expansion, Phase 2, number 19-092, PRK-004. And this is an action item.
Hello, I'm Nicole Johnston, Parks Manager and Project Manager. Still sitting next to me is Parks and Recreation Director John Lunsford. Okay, so Phase 1 of Grandview Cemetery expansion started on November 11th, 2020. And during Phase 1, we had removal of the trees and the blackberry bushes. We also had installed a sediment pond and a swale, and installed a paved access road. So this is an aerial shot done somewhat early in the construction once most of the trees were taken down in this site. So tonight, our purpose of tonight is to approve the contract for Phase 2. So in Phase 2, this will include landscape that will meet all permit requirements, irrigation, an internal access road with parking pullouts, plots for graves, a fence behind the neighbors' homes that live on Hillcrest Drive and around the sediment pond. There will be a front entrance improvements on Hillcrest Drive that will include a sign and more landscape. I did want to mention that the park staff was able to cut down about $95,000 on this Phase 2 by doing some of the prep work ourselves. So kudos to the parks crew for getting that done. Some items that we're going to delay for a future Phase 3 will be, which we don't know when that's going to be yet, but that will be the actual columbariums. Right now in the south end of this plan that you're looking at, there's an area ready for columbariums, but we're actually not installing the columbariums in this phase just yet. So that will be a future phase. And also in a future phase, Phase 3 of this project will be installing a new restroom, which will be towards the north end of the expansion. So again, the columbarium and the restrooms will be in a future phase, Phase 3. Any questions about what we're going to do? We're hoping to start this as soon as possible. I would like to issue the notice to proceed to Trinity Construction as early as September 30th, and I know that they are eager to start working on this. I think in their contract, They were given 34 working days to finish the job. So yeah, I think we're all eager to get started and get this piece of land looking like a cemetery.
Mayor here.
Mr. Miller.
Clearly, we need to continue on phase two. We obviously owe it not only to the community, but the neighbors that we promised to do it. I guess that the biggest challenge is, I think all of us on council are probably looking at the $50,000-ish delta from the engineer's estimate. But I don't think we have much of a choice, and we need to proceed forward with this.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
If it's appropriate, unless there's any other discussion going forward, I will move that the city council authorize the mayor to sign contract 19-092 PRK 004 with Trinity Contractors, Inc. in the amount of $605,972.48 to perform the Grandview Cemetery Expansion Phase 2.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Young, a second by Mr. Carter. Any other questions or discussion? Ms. Hunt, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Cleveland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole and the park staff. We look forward to this project, and it's something the community is looking forward to having completed too. So thank you for all your work. All right. Well, let's have a good evening. At this time, I'll adjourn the meeting. Good night.